Recording should be starting now. And apologies for the noise in the background. I've got a combination of a neighbour chainsawing a tree and a small child playing quite an involved game to do with pirates. So both of those things might interrupt us at any time. Right, so welcome. This is Show and Tell for the project that's been looking at designing and building a website for Buckinghamshire Council and Show and Tell 14, goodness. And appreciate lots of you may well have seen these before, so kind of sorry for repeating some of the intro steps, but these are a little bit for anyone who's new to this. So this is to be honest, mostly for ourselves, Show and Tells. This is a chance for the team to kind of reflect on what we've been doing over the last few weeks, to kind of share our work with each other and to open ourselves up to feedback from colleagues as well. So it's an opportunity for you to hear a little bit about what's going on, kind of keep up to date with where things are and what we're planning to do, but also to ask questions either kind of now in this session, or if you wanted to drop any of us a line afterwards, to kind of get in touch with anything that might come to mind that you would like to know more about. So yeah, please do kind of I think there's now a raise a hand feature in Microsoft Teams I've just seen, so you can have a go at that if you like, or drop it in the chat, or interrupt me and ask questions, or any colleagues when they're talking as well. So the kind of the way that this project works is a bit of jargon for you, something called agile and user centered. This means it's very much based in research with real people, and it's based on prototyping things. So we try things out, put them in front of real people, get some very quick feedback, and we use that to steer our decision making and our thinking, and ultimately the products that we build as a team. And we've got some of that to kind of share this week with you. So we've got the outputs of some quite interesting testing. We talked a little bit last time about some of the thinking we need to do on the vision. So this is the kind of bit in bold here is the bit that's going to kind of stay fairly consistent. This is the overall purpose of the project. This is the thing we're building. The bit underneath that's been greyed out was very much our focus for kind of day one, for April the 1st. And we need to come back around and have a little bit of a think about, how we need to reframe that now for the new authority over probably over a slightly longer time period as well, and then build a bit of a roadmap of work that reflects that. So that's something we'll be looking at fairly soon. Over the last couple of weeks, we've been doing, as you can see, lots of work to kind of wrap up what we call technical and design debt. So these are some of the choices we made in the rush to get to the finishing line for April the 1st, and then subsequently in the rush to deal with the coronavirus crisis. Means some things were not done perhaps as robustly or as thoughtfully or with as much kind of design and research as we would always like. So we're going back around and fixing some of those. And we're also, as we launch things, we start to get feedback in terms of how users are using them, and we see with some of the new job sites, for example, any of the bugs or any of the things that aren't quite working the way we expected that are in there kind of rise to the surface as people start to interact with it, and they find their way into our kind of work plan as well. We've also been looking at some things around policy and strategy, kind of analytics, and cookies, which are some of the things that help us kind of track how people use the site, and a piece of work I won't talk a huge amount about because it's a separate project, but we will mention a couple of times around the Family Information Service, and we're building with a separate project, a product there that also includes bringing some content from that service into this website, and having that team kind of being responsible for managing and writing that content. Something we wanted to share, boast about, is as a result of the kind of investment in time and effort that we've put into the site, both at a technical level in terms of how the product works, what we built, how the team have built it, but also the way that we publish content, the way we think about the use of images, the way the whole thing hangs together means it's been ranked as being a very accessible website, which is fab. So we like league tables in local government. This is one that's run by Soccer Team and their partner agency called Silktide, and it does some kind of automated testing of websites to check how accessible they are. So do they meet a number of kind of technical technical rules around accessibility? Is the content, broadly speaking, understandable? And we came fourth out of all of the local authority websites in the UK, which is great. It's a really big achievement. It's a huge testament to the effort that the whole team have put in, and certainly the development team have put into making an accessible website, which is really, really good news. The but, I guess, in that, just to be really honest and self-critical, is we know a lot of the transactional services that our residents interact with are not currently delivered through this new website. So in reality, a user's experience as they go through a transaction of some kind will change as they go from the new website onto one of our older platforms. And those older platforms have different levels of accessibility. So the true experience for a user is not always going to reflect that of a kind of fourth placed website. I think it's very fair to say, but it gives us really important line in the sand in terms of how we design these things. And it's something that we really want to hold on to. So this gets reviewed every month, and our rating will go up and down. It looks sometimes at different pages, and depending on what others are doing or what we've had to do, might change our position in a rank. So it's a useful benchmark, and something we'll kind of keep in mind. So I'm now going to hand over to Boris, who's going to talk about some of the work that's been happening around policy and strategy pages, and I'll let Boris take over screen sharing because I think that's going to be a lot simpler.
Thank you, Ben. Let me just see if this works. Cool. Are you able to see my screen? Yeah. Policy and strategy pages. So this is it's related to what Ben was just talking about, which is about accessibility, really. So one of the main drivers for this work stream is to make longer documents more accessible. Just going to click on the next page here, just to give you a quick sample of what we're talking about. So we might be talking about documents like the corporate plan. We might be talking about various policy stuff that's on the website. Usually these come in forms of a really long PDF document, for example. But we're trying to follow a lot of the guidance that's been established by the Gov.uk website, and that part of that is making these documents more accessible, and that means potentially publishing them in an HTML format, right? So to have a PDF, but at the same time have a more accessible online version of the same document. So at the moment, we've been doing some designs about how we might present this. And this week in particular, this sprint in particular, we were focusing on some of the some additional features that we knew are still missing, but also trying to make these designs work on a mobile phone. So I'm going to show you a quick demo of how we currently think some of these pages might look like on a mobile phone, for example. So let me just show you what we've been working on. So this is an example of how the corporate plan, for example, might look like on an iPhone. So we are talking about having a kind of short summary page with some links where you can maybe download the document, but also see it online. And then we're kind of aiming for quite a simple structure that could work for a variety of different documents. So you're going to see this particular layout is quite different to the PDF version of the corporate plan, but that's partly because we want to reuse the same layout for different documents. So we're thinking about quite a simple layout, again, having the main details on top, then having some quick links to the various pages of the document, and then basically a one-column layout with some kind of elements in between, like this one. So for example, this could also mean having some kind of numbers, right? So some statistics could be quite useful. We could have some images, but we're trying to not go too far beyond that. So we're currently trying to keep this quite simple. And we do have a few additional elements which may come in play in various different documents, right? So corporate plan is quite a different document when compared to something like the minerals and waste local plan, right? So this sounds like a very exciting document. I have looked at the PDF, I've looked at the PDF of the old version of this, which is like around 100 pages of mainly text, and then some plans and such, and a lot of data as well. Now, one of the features that we may want to see in this kind of a document, again, you can see it's quite similar in terms of the layout, but some of the things we've added here are numbered sections as well as paragraphs, right? So we've seen that the number of documents, they could potentially use the numbering so that people can refer to things more easily. We're also looking at ways of presenting data in a way that works even on a mobile phone. We're currently looking at, just kind of some basic data. How can we present that? I guess one of the benefits of having a live version of a site compared to a PDF is that you can do things like that, right? So you can present the data in different ways. So it could be a table, it could be a chart, and even beyond that. So if we go to the appendix here, you could have, with documents like this one that has a lot of data in it, right? You could have data available as a downloadable kind of CSV kind of spreadsheet format, right? So for example, here we're saying we could, see various data sets attached to a document like this, maybe even viewable as a slightly longer table. One of the things I was also exploring here is like how useful would it be to actually have a really wide table like that available on a mobile phone? And would people actually want to use it in this way on a mobile phone? Is that useful at all? Or like having potentially a map, for example, right? So if you have, local plans, for example, they could have various geographical data sets in it, and this could be quite useful to present. So this is just a quick overview of some of the things we've been kind of working on. Another thing here is the glossary, for example, right? We're trying to see if it'd be useful to have a way of, for the more technical documents, to have some kind of a glossary attached to it. And a lot of the PDFs have that already. It's just that on the website, you can then do that in a slightly more interactive way. So we're kind of trying to play with that a little bit. Back to the presentation. So one of the main things we did really is like we did these designs, but then we said, let's try and see what the residents say about this, right? Are we actually thinking along the lines of what might be useful to residents? So we showed some of these designs as well as the desktop versions of them to a number of residents this week. This was a little bit of an experiment for us, I suppose, because we haven't done any one-on-one user testing since the whole COVID situation began. So we did this using some kind of an online platform similar to what we're using now for this show and tell, that allowed us to have a video call with the residents at the same time as them actually sharing their screen and then showing us how they were using these prototypes. So just to quickly go through some of the insights that we got from these user testing sessions. And this is all very specifically around these policy pages, right? So the longer document pages. So we've seen, for example, that in many cases, readers of policies and strategic documents, they will have a high need for a very specific information, right? And that depends very much on their particular situation. So I was talking to someone, for example, who just received some notification of a reduced council tax scheme that applies to his situation. And, he just didn't quite understand exactly why he got that and how that worked. He was trying to find some information online about that. Or I was talking to someone else that works for a charity for disabled children, and then she was saying that, she is really interested in understanding the whole disability agenda that the council has, and that's really important. So very specific information, but actually quite highly important for the people that need it. Where a lot of the testing was around understanding how people react when faced with these different formats of information, right? So what's the online format compared to the PDF format like? For a lot of people, they actually quite like the PDF. I was a bit surprised by that. They found that was quite a useful thing. Maybe because they're partly used to that already, but also because I think that they're quite happy to have a longer document in that format. And what they really liked the online version for was just to kind of quite quickly understand what a document is about. They really liked the fact that we had a content section in there, so they could quite quickly glance through it and then just, get some very quick insights from it. But if they were to really read, properly through a longer document, they were quite happy with the PDF. Another thing they really like the PDFs for, and that was quite a topic of the conversations, was that they, in many cases, they like storing these documents and refer back to them, right? So they don't necessarily trust the online content to be there in a month from now. So they quite like to download stuff. And if something is just online, very often they would take a screenshot, for example, and save that somewhere so that they can, later use that data that they got in whatever way they need, right? Whether that's in a presentation of their own or whether that's just to prove to someone that something has been published by the council. Another thing that kind of is related to all that is versioning, right? So people really like to know if what they're reading is the latest or most up-to-date version of a document or of a policy. It's not always obvious that something is the latest version, in particular when it comes to PDF that they maybe have downloaded a while ago. They don't always know whether that's been updated or not. So they sometimes go online to check if that's the latest version, and a web page is generally assumed to be the latest version. So that's something, again, that the website is different in respect to PDF. But also, I think there's opportunity there to do something around that to make it clearer, I guess, maybe even in a PDF if that's the last version or not. And this is the last slide I have here. So there were a lot more insights, but one of the kind of general topics we discussed was what are the attitudes that residents have towards the council sharing their data openly and in an accessible way, and what does that mean? What does that look like? So generally, everyone seems to be very positive about the council, being able to share data openly and information openly. They think it's a very good thing. In fact, one of them said that they are entitled as a citizen to know certain information about the council. But also, I think one of the learnings for me was that when it comes to sharing and openly and accessibly, one of the key things is for people to be able to find that information, right? So it's not just about putting it on a website somewhere, in a way that perhaps is useful for a screen reader. But that's great, obviously. But if someone is not even able to get to that page, that's really not worth that much. So I think we need to keep that in mind, that all this information needs to be easily accessible via a search of some sort or something like that. So that's it for the policy and strategy pages. I'm going to hand over to Nick, who is going to show a little bit about the work he's been doing around complaints and other Aptian forms and improving those forms.
Thank you, Boris. Please let me know audibly if you can see my screen being shared.
I can, yes.
Good. Okay. So yeah, I'm Nick. I haven't spoken in many of these before. I'm the lead developer on the project. It's nice to speak to you all. We built this integration with the Aptian Forms backend for the complaints and all the user requests department. We got this launched in time for the first launch of the new council on vesting day. And since then, we've been improving it a little bit to get gradually closer to the designs that we had, which were had a bit loftier ambitions than what we deployed as a minimum viable product at the very beginning. So this is the live version of the freedom of information form. But if you go and have a look at what it's supposed to look like, it's got some nested fields where we don't really need to know where you're from if you're a person making the request on your own behalf. And it's got a very succinct little section for let us know how to contact you again, whereas the live version has all of those fields that we might possibly know because we didn't initially have a way of displaying only the required ones. So if I go to the version that we've got as a work in progress now, we've got somewhere where you can say whether you're an individual or you are part of a company, and then you can start to say, okay, this is a required field. Contact details are required as well, so I'm going to stick those in. And then when it comes to who am I might want you to phone me or use my email address. and I can change my mind at the last minute and say, no, actually phone me instead. And hopefully if I submit this, this field, now that it's been selected, has been marked as a required one, so we have to enter it. And even though I entered email before, it's the phone number field that has been told, no, you must fill this in. So we've got this idea of conditional display of the fields, and also conditional logic around which ones we need and not. I know Jane, my colleague, demonstrated these a few weeks ago when they were in a kind of still making their way towards this state. And we've had validation of these fields all along. These fields these form submissions get sent off to the Aptian Respond API and then brought back if there's any issues there as well. So what we're trying to do with the field validation is also intercept anything that or mimic in our code what the back end also requires, so that we don't have a slow response and a big round trip from the user to our server, from our server to the API backend, and then back, and then back. So a lot of our validation is mimicking what that backend is doing. Here's another one for subject access request, which is pretty much the same sort of thing, except this time it's got a required group of fields here for if you've worked as a member of the council in the past. And I'm going to show you this one. Oh dear, because I was waiting. I'm going to show you this one, hopefully, in a mobile browser. But I'll give that a moment to load. So again, we've got conditional logic. I'm going to come back to that one in a moment. We've got conditional logic. You can tell us information about why we must release some important information to you from the police, and you need to know A because of A. Then it's important that you tell us why you need the information, otherwise we're not going to give you the information. So live demos. So this is a required field to say what is the reason for the information, but actually if you tick this one in particular, disclosure is required by an act of parliament, then this one becomes a required field as well. The logic that detects this does in fact require you to tick one of these, and it's broken here, but it was something I spotted this morning and is fixed locally, so that will eventually, that fix will make its way onto the website. I am gonna give one quick go to logging in here and see if I can demo one of the accessibility changes we've made to these forms as well, which is where we've got lots of different types of input, including for email addresses and phone numbers and what have you. And we've made sure that with the accessibility audit, which is partly what got us that great high score of 4th in the tables, that these fields here are marked up accordingly, so that with this just general information field, we get a normal keyboard with a big space bar. But if I go and type in one of these fields here, they're just text fields, but we've marked them up in a way that the browser knows that it wants a number as an input, and so that I can put in the 23rd of May. That's this Friday. No, it's this Saturday. I don't know why that is a particular date, other than that it's Richard O'Iardy's first birthday. Must be the reason. And then finally, if I can finally find the email field, I can't because mobile browsers on a mobile browsers on with a mouse are a bit more awkward, but we go to the email field and we get a little space bar with an @ sign as well. And if we go to the phone number field, then we get a slightly different set of digits, but here with some extra phone buttons. So that's just one small and mostly invisible to many users aspect of the accessibility changes we've been making, but the there are many of these across the whole site, and they're what's helped us to get the 4th in the table score that I think everybody on the team is very proud of. Thank you. Back to Ben, I think.
Just to add to that little comment about the date, the 23rd of May also happens to be my birthday, so which is why it's there.
I did know that, I just didn't like to say it.
Thanks, Boris, and thanks, Nick. That was awesome. Yeah, so hopefully just a little bit of insight. I mean, Nick says they're small things, but they're really not. And hopefully it shows the level of kind of detail and thinking that goes into building things like that. Like having a bit of an obsession over every single button and input on every single field is kind of what you have to do now if you're going to design a website that's able to meet the needs of all of our residents. So just quickly to wrap up in the last couple of minutes. So what's coming next? Boris and I were kind of reflecting on this just before we kicked off. This is a pretty unhelpful slide now because we're right at the end of it. So this was our kind of original way of displaying our roadmap that got us through kind of our initial testing and building into hitting vesting day. We're kind of out the other side of it into some uncharted land now, and that's somewhat reflective of where we are. So we do need to circle back around on the kind of vision for the product generally, and we also need to have a bit of a session thinking about what our roadmap looks like, and how do we decide what the next most important things are, because there's still frankly so much to do. And do we build a school closure system next, or do we worry about an events platform, or do we do some more work on things like forms? Are we going to have to integrate with the Revs and Bends system anytime soon? Like there's a lot of stuff that's still quite unknown for us that we need to try and align our work plan to some of the other big change that will inevitably be happening across the organization. So next steps, we need to have a bit of a workshop on just that to try and do what we can to be a bit clearer about what's coming next and what's on the priority list. We're doing some other work. Just wanted to kind of nod to colleagues doing some other related projects. We're going to do a very quick piece of work on fixed penalty notices for fly tipping. This is a kind of a new policy and therefore a new service that we'll be bringing in. We're not going to initially build this directly into the new platform. We're going to do something quite quick by way of a bit of a kind of minimum viable version of something using one of our existing kind of low code forms platforms, just to get something up early and to test the processes around that. But we'll have a think about how that might be kind of worked into the new website in the future. Accessibility improvements, to be honest, this is always going to be there. So this is an ongoing job. Anytime we add something, we need to keep on top of this. I mentioned we're designing and building on a separate project, a new directory of services and a new kind of back office system for colleagues in the Family Information Service. There's loads of useful kind of information, advice and guidance content that they currently have on a different website that needs to find its way across in the next couple of months. So we'll be working with that team to design some new templates and to kind of bring a lot of that information over as quickly as we can. We're just about to kick off a discovery project as well. So we're going to have a small team, kind of slightly separate to the core team, looking at, and this we need to find a better name for this, but looking at everything to do with things like CRM systems, my account systems, and citizen indexes. So this is all about, how do we hold the right information about our users, and how do we help people have a really good, quick experience of using our website, without having to go through lots of unnecessary logins and being able to kind of usefully and quickly kind of log in where they need to and see perhaps the balance of accounts where they need to, but similarly not be forced to do that if it isn't necessary for any particular service. And this has lots of arms and legs, so it's going to have to be quite a focused discovery. This has implications on the CRM systems are used by lots of colleagues, so colleagues in our contact center rely on these platforms as well as some of our kind of transactional frontline services using different platforms too. So we're still working on scoping this and having conversations with colleagues across the organization about the right way to frame it. We'll keep doing some remote research. I think the work that Boris has done over the last week has been really helpful, and it's proven that we can still do kind of one-to-one user research with people using kind of some of this technology, and with people across a kind of broad range of digital skills and ages and so on as well, which is great. And we still have teams working on our old websites too, so this is a kind of an ongoing challenge now between operating a kind of I don't like the phrase business as usual, but a business as usual kind of services alongside designing the new site too. So lots and lots going on. Next show and tell is going to be on the 11th of June. So we've moved into a kind of 3-weekly cycle now. That feels about the right balance for the team. It just means a little bit less time spent planning and a bit more time across the 3 weeks doing the work, which is great. And that's kind of it from us. I mean, we're happy to hang on for a little bit. I know we're right up on the half hour, which is beautifully timed, but we're happy to hang on for a minute if people did want to jump in with any questions. Otherwise, drop us a line, get in touch another way, and we'll see you all soon. As I say, we'll hang on for about another kind of 3 or 4 minutes if people did want to ask anything. I think that's a no. Thanks, everybody, and we will see you all next time. Thanks, Nick. Thanks, Boris. That was ace.
Cool. See you later.